You tuned to Radio Helderberg 93.6 FM 25 to 9 this morning. En hierdie regskolom word met trots aangebied deur STBB prokureurs. Vir vooraanstaande regsadvies teen bekostigbare tariewe, skakel hulle op 021-850-6400. Jy moet net onthou dat Radio Helderberg of STBB prokureurs nie aanspreeklik gehou kan word vir enige skade gelei wat voortspruit uit advies gegee in hierdie regskolom program nie. Elke saak moet op sy eie meriete hanteer word.
Established in 1900, STBB Attorneys is a firm of approximately 90 business-minded lawyers practicing from 11 offices throughout South Africa. By understanding our clients' needs and objectives, we strive to deliver cost-effective legal solutions for all business and personal matters. The Helderberg team specializes specifically in property law and developments with a commitment to developing close working relationships with our clients, enabling us to succeed consistently on their behalf. Big represents our reach and professionalism. Small is our personal approach to our work and our clients. Let our 120 years experience be your guide. You can visit our website at stbb.co.za.
Now this morning, for the first time, we welcome Samantha Adams, Associate at STBB, focusing on litigation. Samantha, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, thank you for visiting us this morning and just telling us more about the lease agreements, selling your property, and any eviction queries. So it's quite an interesting and relevant topic.
So I think let's jump straight in. And I think the top question is, can a property which is occupied by a tenant be listed for sale and sold successfully?
Absolutely. So a property can be listed and sold, provided, of course, that the seller informs the purchaser that the property is currently tenanted.
Okay.
And that in order for the purchaser to occupy the property, either the tenant has to willingly vacate the property, i.e. terminate the lease earlier, or the purchaser has to wait until the expiry of the lease agreement.
Oh,
Sure.
Okay. Now, on that note, what is the legal maxim, the hier gaat voorkoop? What does that mean, and how does this affect the purchaser?
So basically, that particular maxim means that the lease agreement trumps any subsequent agreement of sale, meaning that the tenant's rights are protected even though the property is being sold.
That's very interesting, Samantha. Okay, so then basically, just what it boils down to is, if you rent or if you lease from your landlord, then no new purchaser can just get you off.
Absolutely.
Sure.
The purchaser cannot ask the tenant to simply vacate the property. They have to wait until they either vacate themselves or upon expiry of the lease agreement.
Interesting.
Sure, very interesting. And now looking at if someone really wants to evict someone, what is the position with respect to evictions under the current lockdown level?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So at the moment, we're at alert level 1.
Yes.
So basically, eviction orders can be granted by the court.
Okay.
However, they are stayed and suspended pending the lapse or termination of the national state of disaster. However, the court can allow the eviction order to be put in place, provided, of course, that it is just and equitable to do so. And in order for it to be just and equitable, the landlord has to show the court that the public health has been taken into account. That the landlord has entered into good faith negotiations with the tenant, whether or not the tenant has alternative accommodation, and various other factors that would show the court that it is just and equitable to grant the eviction order, even though the national state of disaster is still in place.
Goodness, it feels like, if you're renting, you've got everything on your side, isn't it? In a way.
So I would say that our law is fair in the sense that it protects the rights of both the tenants and the landlords. It's a balancing of the scales of what is just and fair.
Okay. Well, Samantha, what does the eviction process entail, and what not to do while proceedings are in motion? What is that?
Okay, so the eviction process is as follows. So if the tenant breaches the lease agreement in any way, the landlord would send through a letter of demand. If the letter of demand is not complied with, then the landlord is entitled to cancel the lease. Once the lease is properly cancelled, the tenant is not allowed to occupy the property anymore. They're an unlawful occupier and they need to immediately vacate the property. However, if they do not do so, we need to proceed with an eviction application. So once the eviction application is drafted, issued by the court, it needs to be served by the sheriff. So it can go one of two ways. Either the tenant can oppose the eviction application, or they can leave the eviction application as is. So if the eviction application is opposed, that means that the matter has to be argued before the court, and the court will decide whether or not to grant the eviction. If the matter is unopposed, the landlord can set it down on the unopposed motion roll and the eviction will go through. Once we have our eviction order, we then need to apply for the warrant of ejectment.
Okay.
So the sheriff serves the warrant of ejectment on the tenant, and the tenant needs to vacate the property.
Okay, so if the tenant then decides, well, I'm not going to, I'm going to stone you from inside, I'm going to lock the doors, what do you do then?
Well, the sheriffs, this is what they do on a daily basis.
Okay.
So they are, for the most part,
They know
equipped
how.
for anything that may happen. And ultimately, it's their job to hand over the keys and the premises to the landlord.
Sure. Wow. Because you hear a lot of horror stories, where people just struggle to get people out, even if they were evicted already. That's it. Granted, you have to go out. But they still struggle, So, yeah, that's so difficult.
Unfortunately, it is a lengthy process, but it is one that needs to be followed. You cannot evict a tenant from the property without an eviction order.
Sure. Now, looking at this past year, I know that a lot of people that are landlords said, you know what, I'm going to give you a break on the rent, or I'm going to be a bit more lenient this year. But for people that maybe didn't do that, and the person that was renting the property wasn't able to pay the rent, can the landlord, or will they be able to claim for unpaid rental, which happened during the lockdown period?
Very good question. So this is obviously a separate topic of discussion from eviction. This is in the circumstances where eviction proceedings haven't yet occurred and there's outstanding rental.
Yes.
So the landlord is entitled to the rental in terms of the lease agreement. And the tenant needs to pay this rental. And if the tenant does not pay this rental, then the landlord can proceed with claiming this arrear rental back in terms of a court application.
Sure, you know what? There's a lot of the landlords said because they got a little bit of
a break on their
holidays,
payments.
yes, payment holidays from the banks. They said, it's fine for my tenant to also have a holiday, but now we have to go back to paying again. Obviously, he's got to pay his bond, so it's so difficult. And well, like you say, sometimes it can be lengthy, but going through the right channels is best. So yeah, Samantha, you are available if there's any listeners that want to know more. You can go and contact STBB. Samantha Adams, she's there focusing on litigation. Samantha, thanks a lot for coming in this morning and just sharing your knowledge on this.
Of course, it was lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
We'll chat to them next week again. If you want to know more, you can contact them on 021 850 6400. Samantha, till next week. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nou ja, hierdie regskolom was met trots aangebied deur STBB Prokureurs. Vooraanstaande regsadvies teen bekostigbare tariewe. Skakel hulle op 021 850 6400. Jy moet net onthou dat Radio Helderberg of STBB Prokureurs nie aanspreeklik gehou kan word vir enige skade gelei wat voortspruit uit advies gegee in hierdie regskolom program nie. Elke saak moet op sy eie meriete hanteer word.